Hello and welcome to the second subpool. This pool gets to be a little bit larger than the one before it, but the top two fleets from this pool will be advancing to the champion pool. In the meantime, let's get this going and see how this plays out. Up first we have Excerpt 7 up against Armor for 18. So Excerpt 7's fleet was the exact submission he sent a little while ago for a tournament called the Skeleton Tournament, in which everyone had to use the same overall framework to build their ship, and this is the one that he decided to use for that. On the other side of the field we have Armor for 18 with the Citelota Lightfoot Brigade Reserve Wing, which is a pretty standard armor for design. As I've mentioned before, the container wings, or the container antennae coming off the ship, are a pretty armor for staple. And he's got a few smaller drone ships back here. These guys carry a bunch of missiles. This is the asymmetrical one, isn't it? Yes, it is. It's back. It's fucking back. And yeah, I do believe the last few submissions from Armor for have been either the same or very, very similar fleets. Well, we can see right away the skeleton chassis that Excerpt 7 is using are quite a bit more maneuverable than Armor for's big brawlers, but at the same time, that maneuverability is coming at the cost of health. Either way, though, I think Armor for loses purely on the grounds of this travesty. Look at these defense cannons. Look at them. That is inhumane. It's fucking inhumane, Armor for. But it does look like round 1 is going to be going in favor of Armor for's fleet, and given the compositions, I don't think we're going to see too much variation in round 2. But here's hoping when round 2 or further matches go a little bit better for Excerpt 7's fleet. I'd like to see them do well, but the skeleton is very finite in its amount of health, and this is a very healthy pool. Or that's right, we were calling that the snail chassis, is the Armor for design. And as we saw, round 1 going in favor of Armor for's fleet. Round 2, however, could be a whole new adventure. It probably won't, but it could be. And Armor for takes the match. So up next we have Dark Sun by Icemourn. No doubt this is the Dark Sun. And you can see this is a very stacked crystalline submission. Missiles in the middle, plenty of guns. Having the thrusters in every direction like that does a very good job of making sure that your ship always has mobility. So let's see how that plays out. The fleet from Icemourn is going to have a little less than some of the other submissions in the pool. but I think it might work out okay in this matchup. Those plasma swords, or those proton swords, are causing some serious problems. The big guy from Icemourn's fleet, you can see, struggling to stay on the field, but putting out quite a bit of fire with all those plasma condensers, and definitely making the enemy work for it. And you can see that the condenser ship from Icemourn, the main condenser ship I guess I should say, has managed to fully recover and is currently laying down some hate. The dogpile from Expert 7 fleet, though, you can see just took out the large condenser ship pretty handily. Turns out, when you surround the enemy and attack from all sides, they can't escape you anymore. And I think that might bode very poorly for Icemourn's fleet. The big guy was a very significant part of the victory last time. These little ones are not to be trifled with. However, I do feel like at this point, Excerpt 7's fleet has the advantage. I'm not sure the smaller ships from Icemourn are going to have the damage or the durability to fully deal with all these skeletons. There's skeletons everywhere. And with just one ship left on the field for Icemourn, it appears that round 2 is all but over. And you can see again the main condenser ship rushing straight into the enemy. It appears to be working out this round though. A few of the skeletons seem to be trying to chase the smaller ships from Icemourn. But again, that could turn around basically at a moment's notice. And looks like Icemourn's going to be taking the match. Well done. Well done. And up next we have the Taranako Fleet Cruiser Detachment by Toxico, which there are two different designs in this fleet. There's this big guy, which has some big guy guns. These are farmers, right? And then there's the smaller guys back here, which are basically the same ship, but on a smaller scale. You can see a lot of similarity between them. I feel like, though, being farmers is not going to serve them well in this pool. There's a lot of tank and a lot of damage. And because of their farmerness, they're also not fast either. You can see the skeletons are pretty quick to begin with, but the Taranako guys might as well not be moving. And round 1 goes to Exter. Moving into round 2. I can't imagine this is going to go too much different. The ships from Exter 7 are going to have no problem catching up and engaging. And when it comes to actual slugging match, the ships from Exter 7 have every advantage. As you can see, their proton swords are having no problem just cutting through the farmer armor. No problem at all. And next up we have Cancer Weavers by Kamikazedalek, which are these things. They, I forget, I think this is also a farmer submission, but these things are pretty big spinners, and then we've got a smaller healing thing, a bunch of med beams all over this fleet. The idea being, I'm assuming, to rotate and spin to minimize damage application while using the med beams to stay alive. But you can see that proton swords. Dalek putting up a lot of points though. I think a lot of that is owed to the Bolsheviks on his ships. The Bolsheviks are pretty expensive, but they do rather solid damage output, and they've got splash radius, which is always useful against basically everything. However, round 1 certainly appears to have gone in favor of Extra 7's fleet. Let's see if the Cancer Weavers can do better here in round 2. As immediately the healing support ship is just wiped off the map. You can see the shots from the Bolshevik coming out, but those proton swords are just cutting through the farmer armor like it's nothing. And next we have the Meta Meatballs by Dukeslayer, which are sentinel spinners. You can see they've got a plasma condenser and a bunch of missiles and a few of the smaller plasmas on the outside of the ship. I think it's not technically homogeneous. I think some of them spin left and some spin right, but they're all kind of the same ship. I feel like Dukeslayer's fleet is going to do much better than some of the other opponents against Excerpt 7s, though. The extra durability, the still more than sufficient damage output, and the advantage of range when it comes to those missiles especially. And the scoreboard seems to agree. And we have the clock winding down. And it does look like Duke's fleet will be taking the match. Interesting to note that the ships were choosing to stay out of their plasma condenser range and instead just use the missiles. I think they were trying to avoid the railguns, maybe? I don't know. I don't know what the AI was doing there. But pretty solid. Yeah, I had actually muted and stepped away for a few. Had to give had to go get Harvey one of his chewable things or whatever. That way he'd stop bothering me. just to entertain yourself for a minute, dog. You'll be alright, little guy. And Dukeslayer here in round 2, you can see, is also kind of running away with the scoreboard. I think, unfortunately for Exterp 7, I just don't think that this sort of fleet design has any answer for Dukeslayer's fleet. And Dukeslayer takes the match. So next up we have Terran Border Patrol by Climhazzard, which you can see Climhazzard's using the spacers to create extra room. These guys are made of container armor with some various laser type weapons. This has got plasma cannons, some missiles, some mortars. All around more or less greatest hits compilation of Terran weapons up against Exterp 7's purely close range fleet. I feel like the lasers are going to go in favor of Exterp 7's fleet, but I don't know that Exterp 7 is going to have an answer for the circular plasma cannon ships. I think they're going to be just too mobile and too long range, as you can kind of see already as they slowly but surely just duo everything down. So the point of spacers is that when the game is placing your ships in the beginning of a fight, it places them so that your ships aren't contacting each other, but the game only uses the bounding radius. So by placing spacers, it essentially puts very large bounding radius ships on the field that don't actually take up much space. And as a result, they do a very good job of not blocking your own ships while giving your ships a larger field to play in. But a very solid round 1 from Climhazzard. Round 2 going a little bit more questionable, but all 3 of the discs are still alive. And that's really going to be the key to Climhazzard winning this. The laser ships are kind of a write-off anyway against Exterp's fleet. The discs, however, are still running around doing their terrible things. And Splinter, you're gonna have to pick one, man. But before the match has started, you're all, I don't want to be in this pool. And now you're all, I think I wanted to be in this pool. What are you doing? But Climhazzard took the match, and now we have Command Execute, who is bringing, looks like more farmers? Yeah, that's more farmers. A lot of farmers this tournament. 1 second. There you go. Alright. So, let's see. These bigger ones have a bunch of shields. Those aren't going to hold up at all, though. But they also have a ton of thrusters and missiles, so they're going to try and keep their distance, one would hope. These little things are maybe going to be functional distractors, but they might... Yeah, they're kind of fast enough. But you can see the larger ones are pretty quick. But the game doesn't necessarily understand that it needs to not get close to things that are scary. And yes, the spacers do have a defense cannon on the front of them. It's kind of one of those abusing the rule as written kind of things. But it does kind of make spacers more expensive. Prior to that rule, they used to just not have weapons. They were just 1,000 radius sticks with like a single thruster. But now they have to be able to move fast enough, and they have to have a weapon on them, which dramatically increases their cost. They're still very tactically relevant, though. An excellent showing from Command Execute. I was beginning to doubt that the ships would control themselves early on, but it does appear that they figured it out and learned to keep their distance from those proton swords. And as a result, you can see the farmer missiles have always been one of my favorite weapons of theirs. The missiles have really solid damage, rather high splash radius. The only problem is the missiles themselves have no health, so they're easily countered by point defense. And on top of that, they are the slowest missiles in the game. But it does seem to be working pretty well here. I suspect there's some kind of conspiracy, though. We don't ever see this many farmer submissions. I think somebody heard me continually mentioning that farmers have never made it to the champion pool, and they were just like, well, if half of us are farmers... And Excerpt 7 did manage to take round 2, though. The ships from Command Execute are fast enough to keep away, they just get disrespectful, and you should never disrespect proton swords. Bad stuff. Wasn't Excerpt 7 the one who created the Dragonfly chassis? Or was that... Or no, I think that was Waste 47. I don't even remember. It's been too long. Gotcha. My apologies. But Command Execute, you can see, off to a very strong round 3 here. Looks like he might take it, but again, all it takes is just a brief second of error, and those proton swords will have no problems removing a ship from the field. The ships that, or the 8 ships were, it was like 2 of the cheap, like 3-point guns and a couple of tiny thrusters. They they don't really serve a purpose. I think it was one of those, I have a couple hundred points to spend, so I might as well spend them. And I don't believe I got a fleet from Camo. And next up we have Armor Fur against Icemourn. Yeah, there's no fleet from Camo here. And yep, good job, Command Execute. Taking around with the farmers. It is worth noting, though, that the farmers have to beat both Armor Fur and Dukeslayer in order to make it to the champion pool. And I think that might be a tall order, even for Command Execute's fleet. Command Execute can really only beat Armor Fur's fleet if Command Execute ships don't derp out, which I don't like rolling those dice. Well, if Armor Fur is going to be killing that the primary condenser ship, it's going to take more than one ship to do it. And I have no idea what the rest of Armor Fur's fleet was doing. Armor Fur does have a solid point lead, though. So he does still have the advantage, and it is just that plasma condenser ship alive. So everything Armor Fur has is on its way over. You can see the drones starting to stack up a little bit, creating problems. No, sorry, X-Derp. The derping out basically just being the AI doing just AI things. And Armor Fur takes round 1. So moving in round 2, as we saw, the primary condenser ship for Icemourn did a very good job against Armor Fur's brawlers, but Armor Fur did manage to squeak away on points. However, 1,000 points when you're scoring 12 and 13,000 is a very close fight. It could easily go either way this time around, especially with Icemourn taking a really solid early lead. I don't recall how the match opened up in the previous round, though. But you can see the primary condenser ship is now busy chasing the drone distractors, and that is not productive use of the condenser ship's time. It needs to be killing those brawlers. and a big cluster of Armor First Brawlers just hanging out together. Guess they're all at the pub. This is as good a place to be as any, I suppose. Icemourn having a 2,000 point lead, though, is troubling for Armor First Fleet, especially coming into the last little bit of the round. There's not a lot of time to get those points back, and at the rate he's going, he's not going to be able to pull it off. Armor needs to apply some more damage. Or no, Armor managed to grab the point lead and is only increasing his lead, so it's looking like Armor is going to be taking the match. Yep, the big condenser managed to get itself dead and cough up enough points to allow Armor First Fleet to take round 2 as well. And up next we have Armor Fur up against ToxicoWaste Incendio. I'm gonna be honest, I can't see this one going Toxico's way. Farmers just do not have any of what they really need to compete with Armor First Fleet. And now we have Armor for 18 up against Kamikazedalek. This is, I think, Kamikazedalek was saying, more the kind of fight that he was anticipating with this design, where the enemy doesn't have overwhelming damage output, which is going to allow the med beams to be a lot more effective. But the big thing about med beams is they'll heal blocks that exist, and they'll help generate blocks that are growing. But if a block isn't growing, then the med beam won't be able to help it at all. So any lost block is going to stay lost. So it's that combined with the fact that the only factions that have med beams are farmers and reds, who are not exactly renowned for their durability, kind of makes med beams very difficult to use. And you can see even against Armor First Fleet, which is high on the durability but relatively low on the damage, the med beams just are not enough to overcome the damage output. And it looks like Armorful will be taking round 1. Won't be too surprised if round 2 goes about the same. The big problem, like I was saying, with the big problem with farmer missiles is their lack of health. And since Armorful has a bunch of lasers on all of his ships set to point defense, unless his ships are actually in close range, then those lasers do a pretty good job of killing the missiles. On top of the fact that Armorful ships are just very durable to begin with. And once the ships are in close range, it generally works out better for Armorful to exchange blows. And as you can see here in round 2, it doesn't look like it's going any real different, with Armorful's fleet just being too durable to be managed. And Armorful takes the match. So next up we have Armorful up against Dukeslayer. And here, I'm not entirely sure. I feel like Dukeslayer's fleet in general has more damage output and possibly more durability, especially when you consider the rotation. But as you can see, Armorful's ships are enormous, and Dukeslayer's fleet doesn't seem to be terribly interested in avoiding the lasers. And so they're getting snailed a bit. And of course, shortly after I mentioned that they were closing into laser range, they stopped doing that pretty promptly. And now you can see Duke putting up a pretty solid point lead. It would take an eternity to actually clean the floor of all of these ships, but they don't need to do that. They just need to score more points, and for that they're doing very well. And Dukeslayer takes round 1. And again, Duke building up a pretty solid point lead. I suspect we're going to see similar to what we saw last time, where just this, basically, for a little while. A slowly widening point gap. And here we see a classic example of the AI doing AI things, as armor first ships just kind of sit there and get shot. Seem to be okay with trading shots at plasma cannon range, but armor first ships definitely have the advantage at closer ranges. However, the AI doesn't even want to try. And Dukeslayer takes the notch. So next up we have armor for up against Climhazzard. If I remember right, Climhazzard was hoping that the plasma cannons on armor first ships would cause his discs to behave correctly. Whether or not that happens, we shall see. Probably pretty shortly, too. And for the most part, it does seem to. The two that we have that are actually engaging his brawler, or armor for his brawlers, are keeping distance correctly. It's funny, you gotta pick one, man. Which pool do you really want to be in? Because keep going back and forth on this second pool. But Kamikazedalek Fleet doing rather well here. A pretty solid showing. And also, Splinter, if you take a nap now, you'll probably wake up in time for your pool. And yep, there was in fact a dog bark. Go here all borking. And round one, as we see, went to Climhazzard on points. So Climhazzard certainly can do it. And the armor fleet here disappeared pretty quickly as Climhazzard managed to deal some serious damage to those brawlers and whatnot. Climhazzard's fleet definitely making a very good showing. The laser ship's pretty much being a write-off, is giving armor for a quick boost early on. But of the 16,000 budget, 12,000 of it is in those 3 discs. So as long as they're still on the field, Climhazzard certainly has the hope for victory. And yeah, I'm basically a monster. And we're seeing a pretty significant point lead for Clem at this point. And fully expecting Clem to take round 2 on points as well, as long as the discs don't get caught, which I don't think is going to happen, but that one on the left looks very suspicious. And it managed to escape. And Climhazzard tanks the match. So up next we have Armor for up against Command Execute. And as I was saying here, I think this is going to be a very hard matchup for Command Execute as well. The point defense on Armor First ships is pretty legit. He's got lasers basically everywhere. And Command Execute relies on those missiles to actually get the job done, which Armor First Fleet is going to do a very good job of resisting. Well, I mean, the snail antenna down here, he caught 2 of Command Execute ships down there, and that's pretty much it. That is points in favor of Armor Fur, and probably not enough time on the clock left for Command Execute to catch up. So I'm feeling pretty confident that round 1 is going to go in favor of Armor Fur. Some rounds we were definitely playing Mons doesn't know shit. Some rounds we're not. And Armorford takes round 2. Or round 1 rather. A pretty good alpha out of command execute, but once the initial alpha dies down, because the launchers have 2 missile slots, the initial alpha is going to have twice as many missiles as normal, because only one can regenerate at a time. And so the initial alpha we saw broke one of the antennae off one of Armorford's snails, but didn't actually cause any long-term damage. And now that the initial alpha is over, you can see the point hemorrhaging has pretty much stopped. Two of the larger ships from the command execute have already been taken apart. I think Armorford's got this match in the bag. I just cannot bet on farmers. Even when they're well done, it seems like they just don't have enough to stand toe-to-toe with the giants. His last ship having a little game of whack-a-mole. And yes, Husk is in the next pool. Along with some other names you might recognize. And Armorford takes the match. So now we have Icemourn up against ToxicoWaste Incendio. I feel like Icemourn's fleet has a pretty big advantage here. The main plasma cannon ship, or plasma condenser ship, I think is just going to go to town. And yeah, you can see it's just cutting these things in half. Just does not care. And I think there's one Tinkerel. And Icemourn takes the match. High damage weapons versus low durability armor. And now we have Icemourn up against Kamikazedalek, which, given how we just saw the condensers deal with farmer armor, I don't think this is going to go too well for Dalek. He does have the rather devastating Bolsheviks, but you can see that the main condenser ship just does not care. It just does not care at all. And Icemourn takes that match as well. Now we have Icemourn up against Dukeslayer. Here, it's a little harder. Icemourn, I feel like, has a pretty big damage output advantage, but Dukeslayer is always on some weird shit. And you can see the main condenser ship for Icemourn being surrounded and taken apart. And the scoreboard tells a pretty convincing tale in favor of Duke's fleet. And once that big condenser ship goes down like that, then I think that pretty much seals it. I don't know that there's enough damage on the field anymore for Icemourn to make a comeback at this point. And given how that fight went, I'm thinking Duke probably has the advantage in this match. And floof, no, your ships have not gone yet, they're in the next pool. And Dukeslayer takes turn 1. Yeah, a pretty large portion of the viewership here is still in the third pool. Much closer on the scoreboard here, you can see the primary condenser ship chasing down one of the meatballs pretty effectively, but the rest of the meatballs are cleaning up the Dark Sun's escort ships, and I think that's going to end up being a problem for Icemourn. That and the Dark Sun itself, you can see, has lost a large portion of its ship. Just having a difficult day in general. I'm surprised the primary condenser ship for Icemourn is still alive. It has taken quite a beating, but as I say that, of course, it goes down, and Dukeslayer wins the match. So we've got Icemourn up against Climhazzard. Not entirely sure what to make of this match. I think one of those discs just alpha'd something. Just like one of the smaller ships from Icemourn's fleet. I think the core from Icemourn's smaller escorts is within plasma motor range, and so sometimes they just magically disappear. And Climhazzard with a very dominant showing in round 1. I'm thinking we might be seeing Climhazzard round 2 as well. And Climhazzard takes it. So next up we have Icemourn up against Command Execute. I imagine this will go in favor of Icemourn. The ships from Command Execute rely on keeping their distance to stay alive, and as you can see, sometimes they just decide not to do that at all. This last ship from Command Execute holding on pretty well though. But I think it's only a matter of time before bad stuff happens, such as that. Or I guess it wasn't the last one. But now the last ship from Command Execute. Against these 3 from Icemourn. With the main plasma condenser ship still alive, I don't know. I don't imagine that Command Execute's odds are all that great. And Icemourn takes round 1. Icemourn's fleet does seem to be having a bit of a harder time actually connecting in any decent quantity. Although, as you can see, it only takes about 2 or 3 seconds, and that wasn't even the primary condenser ship that took out one of Command Execute's missile ships. That was one of the smaller ones from the fleet. And even they're able to take apart these missile ships from Command Execute pretty efficiently. Which Icemourn already has the 1-0 lead from round 1. But round 2 here is making it look like Command Execute is not going to just give up. And Command Execute takes round 2. So the farmers to the champion pool dream might still be alive, but this is a pretty unfortunate start for Command Execute's fleet. And Icemourn takes the match, taking no shit in round 3. But now we have ToxicoWaste Incendio against Kamikazedalek. I feel like here Dalek is going to have a pretty significant advantage. You can see Toxico has the better range because of the cannons that he's using, but those Bolsheviks are just going to do work. Dalek off to a much stronger round 2 here. As you can see, round 1 ended up going in favor of ToxicoWaste Incendio, but Dalek just letting us know that he is not to be counted out just yet. And as you can see, Dalek took round 2. Very much anyone's game here, as these two farmer fleets smash against each other. And here it's looking very confident in favor of Toxico yet again. A pretty close brawling match, but certainly does seem like Toxico is getting the better end of it. Minute and a half still on the clock, and only one ship left on each side, so this could still turn around either way. But I imagine it probably won't. And next up we have Toxico up against Dukeslayer. I can't imagine this going in favor of Toxico. Dukeslayer's fleet is too dangerous and too durable. And more or less, as anticipated, you can see Dukeslayer running away with the scoreboard. And that flash of light was actually the largest ship from Toxico getting destroyed. And Dukeslayer takes the match. So up next we have Toxico up against Climhazzard. And again here, I'm feeling like Climhazzard's probably going to take this one. I don't know that Toxico is going to have any answer for the discs. And the discs themselves are also carrying quite a bit of point defense, so those missiles aren't going to get very far. Meanwhile, the discs each have mortars on them as well. Just a whole bag of recipe problems for farmers to deal with. And after that display in round 1, I fully expect round 2 will go roughly the same. And Climhazzard takes the match. So next up we have Toxico up against Command Execute. Doing quite a bit of initial damage out of Command Execute's fleet. You can see that first volley completely cut one of Toxico's ships in half. And this fight I think is a little bit more fair than most, given that both fleets are farmer fleets, but I do have to err on the side of Toxico's fleet. He is he's got that massive missile payload, and he's able to avoid at least a fair amount of damage, whereas Toxico kind of just has to eat it. And yeah. And Command Execute takes the match. So next we have Kamikazedalek up against Dukeslayer. I fully expect this one to go in favor of Dukeslayer. The meatballs are just too durable, and the condensers are more than dangerous enough to punch through blocks despite the med beams. And Dukeslayer takes round 1. And like I said, I don't think round 2 is going to go a whole lot different. The meatballs are probably just too much for these things. Meatballs kill cancer. Just remember that, ladies and gentlemen. Eat your meatballs. Never get cancer. And Dukeslayer wins the match. So next up we have Dalek up against Climhazzard. I'm actually not sure what to make of this one. Dalek has more health than Climhazzard's fleet, for the most part. And the farmer lasers actually have a lot of range, combined with those Bolsheviks. But the discs are just going to kind of do what the discs are going to do. And yeah, you can actually see... Alright, looks like Climhazzard is going to run away with it. There's only disrespect coming out of Climhazzard's fleet, though. And Clim takes on 1. So moving into round 2, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of difference here. A pretty close round 2 here. I think 2 of the discs died already, which is pretty significant, and the remaining disc is not in good condition. It is below mint condition. But it does appear to be repairing itself pretty quickly. And it seems to be fully back online. Now, can the disc beat the cancer? That's the real question. And the answer is no. So it looks like round 2 is going to be going in favor of Kamikazedalek in a rather impressive showing. I was not anticipating that. I think he got a big advantage early on from one of the discs flying in between all 3 of the cancers and getting taken apart. The combined firepower of multiples of those is pretty staggering. And moving into round 3. Here we can see though Climhazzard's discs are doing what they need to be doing. Mostly kind of sticking together and focusing fire, and it ends round 3 rather quickly. And now we've got Dalek up against Command Execute, which here I think Dalek probably has the advantage. The Command Execute's fleet has more missiles, but Dalek has more lasers and more armor. And as you can see, the missiles did a lot of initial damage to that armor, but it's mostly recovered already. Meanwhile, the shielded ships from Command Execute kind of have to make mistakes, but if they do, then Dalek will probably be able to put up enough points to win very quickly. And with Command Execute ships finally getting pinned up against the wall, that could be a problem. But it does seem as though they've managed to escape this time. Pretty solid point lead in Command Execute's favor. And Dalek doesn't look like he's going to be able to change that anytime soon. And with round 1 going pretty comfortably in Command Execute's favor, round 2 will probably be about the same. And with yet another lead for Command Execute, actually, of course, as I'm saying it, one of Command Execute's ships gets caught, and Dalek's ship manages to capitalize and take it apart. And it looks like a really strong round 2 from Kamikazedalek this time around. Showing that he can, in fact, fight back. Get in there with a flanking maneuver. And Kamikazedalek gets on too. So now let's see how round 3 wants to go. See, that initial volley actually managed to take down one of the Cancer Weavers. That could be a problem for Dalek's fleet. I think he needs all three of them really to function. Yeah, now, look, Command Execute only has the 3 of his ships now left, too. So, even though Dalek lost one of his ships immediately, they're not really that far apart anymore. Yeah, there's just a 50-point gap between the two fleets right now, and it's been there for a while. The big problem is they just can't hit each other really. There's enough point defense on both sides that they just can't connect with any missiles. One of the Command Execute ships though almost got pinched. And just like that, Command Execute is taking the match. So next up we have Dukeslayer up against Climhazzard. And I feel like Dukeslayer probably has the advantage in this fight. The laser ships are going to probably get cut down pretty quickly. The smaller, the discs have shown a lot of disrespect in other matches. And continuing to do that against Dukeslayer's ships will be fatal, as it just showed right there. And I'm feeling pretty confident in saying that Duke's got round 1 in the bag. I know the way round 1 went, it could go a lot different if Climhazzard's discs decide not to be disrespectful, but they've been pretty disrespectful all tournament. I don't know if I don't know what's going on with them, but they are not understanding how dangerous their opponents are. And you can see right away that all 3 of the condensers charge, or all 3 of the discs charge directly into point blank with these meatballs. And as Duke's mentioning, the largest plasma condenser does over 2,000 DPS, which will drill through just about any target. And it also, I think, of the main battle cannon style weapons, I think the largest condenser has the longest range in the game as well. Yep, Duke generally takes no prisoners. Execute all the captives. And Duke takes the match. Next up we have Duke up against Command Execute. And I can't imagine this going terribly well for Command Execute. It's probably going to be a bit of a dancing game while Duke's fleet tries to surround and trap the farmer ships, but eventually they'll make a mistake, and when they do, they'll be punished for it pretty heavily. The Command Execute doing a lot better than I was expecting. I was thinking the AI would have made some poor choices by now. But with one ship off there keeping most of Duke's fleet busy, while these other three on the right kill one at a time. It's working out really well for Command Execute. What are the odds? Although in the last 20 seconds Duke manages to kill one of Command Execute's ships, Get himself a lot of points. And that's probably going to seal round one. Yep, round one in favor of Dukeslayer. And that went about as well as I think it could have gone. I don't know that it's going to go much better for Command Execute here in round two. Duke off to a much stronger start. As you can see, one of Command Execute ships already being heavily damaged. Half the ship already gone. The Meatballs are they're here to kick ass and take names. They've got a very big notepad. I'm feeling pretty confident Duke is going to take round two as well. Dukeslayer takes it. So last up we have Climhazzard up against Command Execute. Let's see how this is going to go. I think Climhazzard probably has the advantage here. His fleet has a lot more engage speed than Command Execute has disengage. You can see the discs kind of just doing whatever they want. And Climhazzard takes round one in a very confident display. I don't even know what that was, but one of Climhazzard's ships just zoomed into the enemy and just murdered. Just immediately dead. And Climhazzard takes it. So let's see, we have Duke and Clim advancing. Easy enough. Alright, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.